Game started.
Them. Okay, them. Your move. Starts with c4. Okay, I go with knight f6, kind of a flexible response, and then he transposes to a queen's pawn opening. So can go with e6 and maybe play a Nimzo-Indian. Yeah. So Nimzo-Indian by another move order. And the bishop d2 line. This is unusual, but not particularly bad. I've looked at that before, and I can't see that there's anything wrong with it. It does leave this pawn undefended, so you get this c5 move. So it's sort of a way of committing to this e3 move in advance. But often e3 is played anyway. I mean, that's the Rubinstein variation, so it does not seem to be a problem. Let's see. If I go knight to c6 immediately, and he pushes, I take, he takes. I think I like to have this pawn on d6 before I play knight to c6 a lot of times. That way the pawn can't keep marching forward. And we'll get something like a Hübner setup. Okay, let's castle. The idea is rook to e8 and pawn to e5, opening up a diagonal for this bishop. And this bishop, the dark squared bishop, can sit out here. It doesn't have to do anything. Although it has to watch out in case all the targets over here disappears, because it doesn't want to get trapped. But if the bishop moves away and the knight moves away and then he starts kicking it, it could even route around to c7, I suppose. But most likely when that starts happening, I'll just trade it off. So we did go for the push. Okay, let's take. It's interesting. So taking with the knight to leave me with the backwards pawn, but allowing this trade of dark squared bishops.
Check.
Okay, well that's forcing at least. I have to take. And is it a problem that d pawn is weak? I don't know. Let's develop the bishop right away, so that I can bring a rook to the d file. And you know, he's not easily going to get a piece to d5. His knight is several moves away from there. It's a 4-hop journey to get to that square from there, and I don't know how he even gets there. And his bishop, that's a piece that could potentially occupy d5. It would have to go to f3 to d5. But it'll be a while before it manages to do that too. Okay, so let's prepare to just push that pawn. And now knight here. He takes. I take the bishop. Takes the bishop. I take the knight. It would just go into this kind of simplified position. Or I could go knight to e7 here would actually allow me to push the pawn. So knight e7, how could he respond? He could double, but I could push anyway because it would be like trading. If he decided to take, it would be trading a rook and knight for a queen, which would be okay. Have to remember the bishop is loose out here, but other than that, it shouldn't be a problem. And this pawn here, when I push, the c pawn becomes loose when I push. But I don't see how he can stop me from pushing. So let's go ahead and do that. Get rid of that one defect in my structure here. So he does go for the exchange. Let's get rid of that and push. So I think I should be in pretty good shape by now. After he takes, I can take back right away. And I can play b6 later to defend the c pawn. I'll have a majority on the queen side that maybe I can turn into a passed pawn later. Could be something to play for. I think white's play was just a little bit too simple in this endgame, so I'm going to go ahead and take there. Trades rooks. Okay, and now what? If he brings his knight out to g4, maybe that's what he intended. I can bring my queen into c3 and put some more pressure on these guys. So he takes back with the queen. That was kind of what I was expecting. I still have moves like queen b2 to hit these pawns over here. He could maybe try and harass my a pawn. That is something that might be interesting. So what is the knight doing there? These squares, f6 and h6, and also knight to e5, coordinating on f7 there is maybe an issue. And I need to do a little work to to get my knight into the game to a better spot. Maybe knight to g6. For the moment, I've just stopped his knight from coming to e5, and he can't play his rook here. So I could play knight g6 and then to e5, or I could play knight to. Now that's an interesting idea. Knight c6 to h. Knight c6 to a4, hitting the queen. a5. Knight c6 to a5, hitting the queen and the pawn. Well, let's start with knight c6. It also stops this pawn from coming forward, his e pawn. And he kind of gave me the. He gave me that d4 square. So I could just go there. Where is the queen going? You know, I just don't like the idea of the queen and the knight coordinating against my king, so I do want to be a little bit careful here. But after queen takes, queen, knight takes, hitting the b pawn looks like a good position for me. There's no real pin because the knight can drop back and defend the rook, or the rook can just move away. So he went with his knight. What does this mean? He's looking at the. He's looking at the. What square is that? The d5 square, yeah, with his knight defended by the pawn. So I could attack the pawn. I could play knight here, hitting his queen. He plays queen takes. I play rook takes, and then he plays knight to e5. Is that going to be a bad position for the endgame? All right, take his queen. See how he takes back, and then play knight to d4, hitting the b pawn. So I get to kind of the same position here anyway. He can push his pawn on to e5. That's true, but it's going to be stopped by the f pawn in the long run. Yeah, so he defends. Let's see. How can I do this? How about f6 to stop that e-pawn from coming forward? And I have knight to c2. Hits the rook and hits this pawn, but his his knight is defending. So I need to kick his knight first and take away squares. So 1, 2, 3. His knight could go here. His knight could go here or here. And then I play my knight, and then he moves his rook somewhere, and then I take the a-pawn. And then his knight is over here on the edge or back here. I think that is good. Well, I guess he will play knight to, or rook to c3. So pawn here, knight back, say. Knight here, rook c3. I take a pawn. He takes a pawn. And what's going on? Well, I like it that it activates my pieces a little bit. Opens up the d file for me. The knight gone. Oh, the knight can't go there. I could also throw in moves like rook to d2 to hit the knight and maybe pick up this f-pawn. So he's really only got, well, he could go here. But then my knight to c2 is a double attack. So he has to go to b2 or to a5. Knight on a5 is threatening. Knight to c6 hitting my rook and the pawn, but I can play rook d7 to defend. Okay, so he goes there. Yeah, that was the one square I thought he couldn't go to. Maybe there's a trick, but there's knight c2. Hits the rook and hits the knight. And the rook can't defend the knight. Oh, the rook can defend the knight. The rook can play rook down to e2. But this way I pick up a pawn, I guess. And his pieces are a bit paralyzed. So after I grab the pawn, does he have any great discoveries? Anything, any tactical tricks? I don't see it. So it looks like I snagged a pawn here. I hope this recording comes out. The last few games, the recordings have been botched. Okay, where can his knight go? It can come around to f3. He can just start pushing his pawn. So I'm just going to start pushing my pawns. I guess potentially is a tactic hitting his rook and winning the knight, but I don't see it at the moment. It would take a couple moves on my knight. I think it's better just to get those pawns rolling. I think I can get that pawn all the way to c2. I don't see how he stops me from playing c3, and then my knight is covering c2. So his knight, so knight b1, for example, is something he can't really play because I take it. So here, maybe his idea is to pin. Now he's just moving his knight there. Okay, so let's get my rook behind the pawn. And let's trade this off. And let's get my king in the game. Had to be careful. He was blocking me. You know, normally I could make that diagonal path to there and defend the pawn that way, but he was blocking me with his pawns. So he's got counterplay over here on the king side. I do have to be a little bit careful here. But I'm going to march my king over to defend the c-pawn. And let's start the A pawn rolling too. Yeah, so we get this
Check.
endgame. And he has to stay around this area to prevent this pawn from queening, and I can come over and scoop up these pawns. So this should be a winning king and pawn endgame for me. Let's see if I can pull it off. Yep, he takes, he pushes, and then I can round this up. And now it's easy. He can't ever come back and defend these pawns. He's got to go over and get this pawn first. And I have two connected pawns over here. So it's not a problem.
White resigns.
Okay, good game. I will upload this and do a
Incoming
postmortem.
challenge.
And see you guys later. Bye.